Hello and welcome to the 24/7 Sports College Football Show. I'm Cooper Patagna. We have an absolutely loaded show for you today right here on CBS Sports Network. Here's what we got on tap. Here we go. It's week 4, but we're already projecting the college football playoff field. Our national analyst, Brad Crawford, is here to tell you what teams are in need of a big win, including last year's national champions, Michigan, as they host USC in this week's CBS Big Ten Game of the Week. Our team site experts will preview that showdown in the Big House. And in that game, Alex Orji will make his first start for the Wolverines, but he isn't the only new face in the spotlight. 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins joins the show. Some other big news in college football this week is that former Super Bowl winning head coach Jon Gruden, well, he wants to coach in college. You may remember that Gruden was ousted from the NFL in 2021 after several racist, anti-gay, and misogynistic emails were uncovered. But Coach Gruden is ready to move on, and for more on that, we welcome in national college football reporter Brandon Marcello, who sat down with Coach Gruden earlier this week. Brandon, I'm just going to ask you point blank, obviously a lot to kind of unpack here, but what did you learn from the Super Bowl winning head coach Jon Gruden?
Yeah, he's working away in his large office building there in outside Tampa. 13 rooms devoted to different teams, a lot of playbooks, a lot of Betamax tapes, old game film. But he's putting himself out there. He says that he wants to get back into coaching at any level, but college football has really piqued his interest of late. Of course, we know that over the last 15, 20 years, his name's been connected to a lot of jobs in college football that never really got serious. But he says that he's ready. He's all ears right now. But of course, the big thing is going to be how those emails in his past will affect his future going forward. And we asked him a couple of different ways if he's remorseful about those emails. And in that story, he said that he didn't really want to comment on it. He's waiting for his due process. And we shall see what that due process looks like, as he's right now trying to fight a battle in court in the state of Nevada, trying to get some more things to light, but we'll see what happens with that. But as it stands now, he wants to get back into football, and specifically college football is really interesting to him.
All right, well, let's dig into that a little bit. Jon Gruden hasn't been a college coach in over 30 years, since 1991, when he was with the Pittsburgh Panthers as a receivers coach. Given his lack of college football experience, how do you think Jon Gruden exactly fits in today's college football landscape?
You know, it's a great question. I talked to him a lot about that, about NIL, the transfer portal and everything. And he's been going around behind the scenes, bending the ears of NIL directors and people who are doing recruiting right now, obviously in the college football world. He's trying to learn it. He's trying to get as much information and knowledge as he can. He told me that the only thing he can guarantee is that he would hire a really good staff at whatever college program were to come calling. That's the one thing he can promise for them. What that would look like, of course, is to be determined. And again, the question is, does any college program give them that opportunity or even an interview going forward? But he is, at the very least, behind the scenes preparing himself for the opportunity to be a head coach at some point down the road.
Well, what's the feedback like from college administrators across the country who are hearing Jon Gruden's name, potentially trying to get back into college football? What have you heard on that front?
Yeah, it's mixed. We talked to a lot of industry insiders for this CBS story, and the general consensus is that they believe that someone out there will probably give him an interview. Of course, there's a long way to go for that, and in a hiring process. In college football, it's much different than the NFL, for that matter. You got to get your board of trustees on board. You got to get your boosters on board. You got to get your university president on board and the community as a whole, just even moving forward with interviewing someone, let alone hiring them. We had one SEC administrator say that they believe that he's untouchable for an SEC head coaching gig in the near future. But several Group of Five administrators, also some agents in the industry, say that they believe that if he were to put himself out there and show interest, that they believe that his school out there would give him an interview, and who knows where that would go from there.
Brandon, appreciate your time. Guys, you can check out Brandon's full article over at CBS Sports. Arch Manning, he's just one of several new faces who will get their first start in Week 4. We'll tell you all about those guys a little later. But first, our Emily Proud and Brad Crawford project the college football playoff field and tell you which teams need a big win this weekend.
Welcome back in. You're taking a look at Brad Crawford's updated playoff bracket and a new number 1. He has Ohio State as the 1 seed over Georgia from last week. The Dogs are now the 5th seed, and Texas is the SEC champ at number 2. And like I said last week, I had kind of a feeling there'd be a different Big 12 rep every week. Last week it was Iowa State. This week it's Kansas State. And finally, his new G5 representative is Northern Illinois. So let's bring in Brad Crawford to talk about his updated bracket. Let's start with the new number 1. Mentioning Georgia, though, what do they have to do to gain back your trust as an SEC champion?
Georgia has to look better on offense. Did not look very good in Lexington last week. Carson Beck, not as many playmakers around him as we thought heading into the season. And the offensive line has some issues now with Tate Ratledge out several weeks with an injury. So I did drop Georgia to the 5th seed, number 2 in the SEC behind Texas. Georgia still has to play Alabama on the road, Ole Miss on the road, and they go to Austin. So we're talking about the Bulldogs and Kirby Smart playing the nation's toughest road schedule the rest of the way.
Number 4 in the SEC is number 6 in the AP poll, Tennessee. They're playing at number 15, Oklahoma. Now, Tennessee is in your field, as I said, as the 4th SEC representative. They're actually up 2 spots to number 8 from last week. But you mentioned a tough schedule for Georgia. The Vols still have dates with Alabama and Georgia on the schedule. So what would a win here in Norman do for their playoff chances?
Yeah, the good news for Tennessee is they catch Oklahoma at a time where the last 2 games for Oklahoma, the Sooners squeaked by Houston by a couple points and then had to have a touchdown late against Tulane to kind of pull that one out last week. So battle of unbeatens in Oklahoma this weekend. But I think Tennessee right now is one of the more SEC's underrated elite teams. One of 5 right now inside that top 6 of the AP poll from the SEC. And I certainly think Tennessee is playoff capable. Dylan Sampson right now running the football with ease. Nico, obviously, at quarterback is playing well. And defensively, Tennessee has not been challenged yet. That changes Saturday night against Oklahoma.
So many storylines going into this game, but certainly a win would go a long way in their playoff chances. Meanwhile, we've got number 12 Utah and number 17 Oklahoma State. Neither is in this bracket, but like I joked, the Big 12 is volatile as heck. So what would a win do for that race?
Yeah, every week the Big 12 championship race is going to change. I mean, I don't see an unbeaten emerging from that conference based on this schedule upcoming over the next 4 to 5 weeks. Several top 20 teams are going to play each other. Beginning Saturday, Utah in Stillwater against Oklahoma State. Cam Rising still day-to-day. We don't know about his injury status. Isaac Wilson likely the starter at quarterback for the Utes. And at Oklahoma State, reigning Doak Walker Award winner running back Ollie Gordon has yet to get started this season. I think he only has 100-yard game, not the typical performance we've seen out of him the last couple seasons, but Alan Bowman, quarterback for the Cowboys, 5 touchdowns last week. So I'm expecting a high-scoring game at Oklahoma State and probably a game, Emily, that comes down to the final possession or 2.
I also would like to see if the Big 12 can get multiple teams in this race. There's another conference, too, that only has 1, and that's the ACC. We've got kind of a game of consequence between Clemson and NC State. As I said, only 1 ACC team in, that's Miami at this point. So why are you keeping an eye on this game between Clemson and NC State on Saturday?
This is a game Clemson really needs to win because NC State's not as strong as we thought they were maybe a month ago as a preseason top 25. You know, you've got Grayson McCall starting quarterback for NC State. He's out. The Pack are going to start a true freshman. And by the way, they're a 21-point underdog in Death Valley. We saw last time out, Clemson scored 66 points against App State. They recovered from that black eye they suffered in the season opener against Georgia. So big opportunity here for Clemson in its ACC opener to pass the eye test and kind of further inch their way closer to Miami, who I think right now the Canes are undoubtedly the ACC favorite.
Still trying to figure out who Clemson is. As you said, we've seen two versions of the Tigers, so this one will say a lot about them. Finally, let's end with the CBS Game of the Week between number 11 USC and number 18 Michigan. It is USC's Big Ten debut in the Big House. They are number 11 in this bracket for you, so you see them as a playoff team. But what can this game do for both of these teams' playoff pursuit?
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we're only in week 4, but Michigan is pretty much playing a playoff elimination game this weekend at home against Southern Cal. And the Wolverines, very rarely are they a home underdog, so Sharon Moore has plenty of bulletin board material inside that locker room. We saw USC a couple weeks ago, Emily, beat LSU out in Las Vegas. Miller Moss at quarterback playing at an elite level in the post-Caleb Williams era. And the big news for Southern Cal is the Trojans are much improved defensively. That's been the Achilles heel of these Lincoln Riley coach teams the last few seasons, but not this season. So Saturday's game in Ann Arbor, very big Big Ten opener for both teams. I think it's just slightly bigger for Michigan, though, because the Wolverines cannot afford to have 2 losses heading into late September.
Wow, a potential playoff eliminator game for Michigan, and we are in September. That is big news there, and thank you, Brad Crawford, so much for your updated playoff bracket. He will continue to update this throughout the season, but just a reminder, one last look at this updated bracket. Ohio State is the 1 seed, Texas the 2, and the SEC champion. You've got Kansas State, the Big 12 rep, and Northern Illinois coming out of the G5. We'll see what changes Saturday brings.
All right, let's bring back national college football reporter Matt Zenitz. Matt, good to see you again. And let's pick up where we left off. Arch Manning, the number 1 quarterback in 2023, he's got his first start this week against Texas San Antonio. You're hearing some chatter from opposing coaches about Arch Manning before he gets his first start. Fill us in.
Well, first of all, I need to get my audio on my computer performing to the same level that Arch Manning performed last week when stepped in for Quinn Ewers. But the big thing that they would say with Arch is that during the course of the last couple of weeks, including based on what he did last week against UTSA, we're starting to see that for as hyped of a prospect as he was, that it was justifiable and had a lot more to do with just his last name. And for me, even going back to Texas's game against Colorado State, where Quinn played most of that game, Arch got in some just in relief duty, had a conversation with somebody on the defensive staff at Colorado State coming out of that matchup. And one of the interesting things that they brought up was that through a combination of what they saw during pregame warmups and then when Arch got in during the course of that game, that it actually reminded them of a game that they had against a high-profile opponent 2 years before that when they faced 2022 Michigan, a team that advanced to the college football playoff semifinals. And the thing that he threw out comparing those two teams is that this Texas quarterback room, to a certain extent, reminded him of that 2022 Michigan quarterback room that, if you remember, started the year with Cade McNamara quarterback before eventually shifting to J.J. McCarthy. And the thing that defensive staffer at Colorado State said is that in both of these games felt like the better quarterback was actually the one on the bench.
It's a pretty bold statement, especially with the way that Quinn Ewers is playing. Matt, let's stick in the SEC. We got a big matchup on Saturday night between Oklahoma and Tennessee in Norman. Nick Anderson, the star receiver for the Sooners, he hadn't played all year. He shows up on the injury list. You got the number 1 center in the country via the transfer portal, Branson Hickman. Lance Hurd, the starting left tackle for Tennessee. All guys that we're going to wait and see whether or not they're going to suit up on Saturday night. What can you tell us the latest on the injury front?
Biggest part of this is the Oklahoma receiver situation. So Oklahoma's had some issues through the first few weeks in terms of passing game, have a very talented young quarterback in Jackson Arnold who has had some struggles through these first 3 weeks. I don't think he's eclipsed 175 yards in any of these first 3 individual games as of yet, with the injury situation at receiver factoring into that. So this is a big deal for Oklahoma that they're now in position to get two of their key guys back within that room. First of all, Nick Anderson, who had 10 touchdown catches last year and has not played through the early part of the season. He's in line to make his season debut. And then Andrew Anthony, a transfer from Michigan, who was emerging as a playmaker for Oklahoma last season before suffering a season-ending injury. He's now set to be back also after missing last week. And then obviously you brought up Lance Hurd on the Tennessee side, a former five-star recruit who's Tennessee's starting left tackle. He missed last week due to an ankle injury. His status is a little bit more up in the air right now compared to those two Oklahoma receivers. And the latest with him is listed as questionable going into the game.
Matt, some tough news on the injury front for East Carolina. Siobhan Revell, a guy that has really kind of been tabbed as a potential first-round draft pick in the NFL draft. He tears his ACL this week in practice. What can you tell us about how that might potentially impact his NFL draft stock?
Yeah, just an unfortunate development. I've heard not only great things about Siobhan as a player, and I think people were becoming more and more familiar with just the caliber of talent that he is, but I've also heard tremendous things from the ECU staff about just the person that he is to go along with that. And this is a kid who, as I'm sure you can imagine, when you have first-round talent at the G5 level, there were a number of high-profile Power 4 teams that were very interested in him entering the portal and potentially being able to add him to their roster. And he was a kid who was loyal to ECU, stayed put despite having a chance to make a lot more money elsewhere. And even being at ECU and not being at a Power 4 place, had flashed enough during the course of the last couple of years and what he did last season that had a legitimate chance to be one of the top defensive backs selected in next year's draft. In the first three games, already had a couple picks, including a pick six, I believe, last week. And just a really unfortunate deal to now suffer this injury in practice during the course of the week and to now be set to obviously miss the rest of the season.
Matt, we appreciate you as always, brother. Have a good weekend. And guys, just a reminder, you heard Brad talking about the impact of the USC Michigan game in the Big House this weekend. Our team site experts join a little later to break the game down. But next, we introduce you to Michigan's new starting quarterback as well as several others around the country. We got a quarterback change in Ann Arbor. Davis Warren, the former walk-on, well, he's out of there. And now, well, it's time for Alex Orji, according to head coach Sharon Moore. Here to break it all down, 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins. Drew, always good to see you. You and I were texting about it earlier, Drew. How do you feel about this? USC on the horizon. What do we think about Alex Orji in the Big House?
Cooper, I'm concerned for Michigan. Alex Orji, he is a very talented athlete, but I do not think he is an elite quarterback. This is a kid that completed just 48% of his passes as a senior in high school. Cooper, he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass of more than 10 yards since October 22nd of 2021. This is a guy that some schools viewed as a wide receiver. Others thought he was a running back. You know, we saw him last week for the Wolverines. He was obviously spliced in a little bit with a few packages in the college football playoff. But I have a ton of question marks about him as a passer, his ability to attack down the field. I think if you're Michigan, you need to think of Alex Orji like Boston College does with Thomas Castellanos, who was also recruited to play some other positions. So I'm interested to see kind of what the offensive game plan is for Michigan on Saturday against a revamped USC defense. But Alex Orji, he's going to have to do it with his legs.
All right, we know about the present. We got Orji, we got Davis Warren, a former walk-on who's already started a couple games for the Wolverines. What about the future, Drew? You're the director of scouting at 24/7 Sports. You're the guy who's supposed to look into the crystal ball. Is this getting any better for Michigan in terms of their quarterback outlook?
I think I'm even more concerned about the long-term outlook for Michigan. Cooper, I want to ask you this. How come no one has brought up Jaden Davis, the four-star quarterback that Michigan signed this past recruiting cycle? Let's not forget, there was a time when Jaden Davis was ranked ahead of Dylan Raiola. Jaden Davis was ranked ahead of DJ Lagway. He didn't play in any all-star games because he wanted to go through those college football playoff practices with the Wolverines. I'm just surprised we haven't heard from him. Now, do we think he's as talented as Lagway and Raiola? Probably not. But at the end of the day, Cooper, this is a kid that completed 70.3% of his passes as a senior. His 11.73 yards per attempt were the best amongst all the quarterbacks in the top 247. So I'm concerned about the Michigan quarterback situation because Jaden Davis's name hasn't come up. And then when you look towards the 2025 recruiting class, the 2026 recruiting class, Michigan has quarterback commits in both of them. And I have questions about those guys as a passer as well. So if you want to use the crystal ball and kind of look ahead to the future, I think we're going to be talking about Michigan and a potential transfer quarterback. I think they're going to be in the market for one of the top arms that comes available in December.
I think this week will tell us a lot. I think looking at the tape, they don't trust Alex Orji as a passer. Only 6 passing attempts this year. Only 1 attempt over 10-plus yards. So we'll see what happens against the Trojans this weekend in Ann Arbor. Drew, are you ready for it? It's here. Arch Mania already, year 2 of his career as he gets his first start this weekend against ULM. We know Quinn Ewers has been out with an injury. He came in last week 9-12, 223 yards, 5 total touchdowns, including a 67-yard run. Drew, tell me you're excited about Arch Manning. And guess what? I think he's like 6 in the Heisman odds.
I mean, Cooper, could you draw up a better situation for him? You know, ULM actually kind of has like a formidable defense if you look at the advanced metrics, but Texas has an elite offensive line. And they got, I think, what might be the nation's top wide receiver room. Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo, Jonte Cook, Silas Bolden, DeAndre Moore. I can keep going on and on. Arch is going to have some targets and some weapons to throw to. I think the biggest thing for me, Cooper, and I say this all the time about these high-profile quarterbacks, I want to see what happens once he makes a mistake. He hasn't thrown an interception yet in live college game action. Dylan Raiola, he just threw his first pick last week, and they pulled him out of the game because they were already winning against Northern Iowa. So my question with Arch Manning is what happens when, there is some adversity? And we'll see. I mean, ULM, I think Texas should easily be able to move the ball against it. But that's the one question for me. Cooper, the other thing, I know this is a kid that you had live exposure to, right? You went down to New Orleans and you got a chance to see him play. How much have we seen him grow? Go back to that spring game 2 years ago, 5 of 13 passing, 30 yards. A lot of people were giving us, throwing it at our face that was our number 1 ranked prospect. But to me, based on what we saw against UTSA, he looks to be a little ahead of schedule here.
Still early, but the haters used to call him Arch Smith. If his last name was any different, he'd be a 3-star. I don't think that's the case. I think we saw that against Texas San Antonio. I want to see what he looks like in his first start against ULM, the nephew of Peyton and Eli, the grandson of Archie. Drew, I didn't see any of those guys moving around like that. I wasn't alive when Archie was playing ball. I heard he can move a little bit, but that 67-yard run, that gets me excited. I know the passer is going to continue to emerge as well. All right, Drew, let's talk about one of your favorite guys, C.J. Bailey, the former teammate of Jeremiah Smith down there at Chaminade Madonna, going to get the start this weekend at Clemson, 20-point dogs, NC State, as Bailey fills in for Grayson McCall. Drew, I kind of think this is a big opportunity for the kid.
Cooper, I'm going to give you 3 numbers here, right? 38, 2, and 3. 38, that's the amount of games Cedric Bailey won in high school. 2 is the losses. 3 is the number of state title rings he got at Chaminade Madonna Prep. Cedric Bailey's a guy that I think grew on us more throughout the evaluation process. And I really go back to his early on in the senior season against Miami Central. Yeah, he's throwing to Jeremiah Smith, the megastar freshman that's now at Ohio State. He's got JoJo Trader on the other side of the field. But this kid has delivered in key moments, 321 yards, 4 touchdowns in that game against Miami Central, which had one of the nation's top high school defenses. Cooper, he is 6'6". He looks like he's an NBA player. He's got a funky release, but I think if you kind of close your eyes and just look at where the football goes, you'll be pleased with it. Now, NC State, they too have some talented weapons. Grayson McCall hasn't, I think, worked out there in Raleigh, and now he's injured. Cedric Bailey steps in. I mean, not the ideal situation going to face a Dabo Swinney defense full of future NFL players, but Cooper, completed 70% of his passes his senior year of high school. Saw him against Louisiana Tech. I think this is a guy that can create both with his arm and his legs. He's a bit fearless out there.
Drew, great to see you, brother. Thanks for dropping the knowledge, as always. And if you like Andrew Ivins and you like more recruiting and scouting talk, well, I got just the show for you. Introducing the 105, keeping up with today's college football news cycle. Guess what? It's not for the faint of heart. The good news, the best in the business are here to break it all down. 2 episodes a week. Join Andrew Ivins, the 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, and me, Cooper Patagna, every Monday and Wednesday on the CBS Sports Network and 24/7 Sports YouTube channel to keep up with all the transactions in today's college football. Coming up on the show, we check in on the biggest recruits around the country and their visits coming up this weekend. But first, Emily Proud checks in with USC and Michigan as we gear up for this week's CBS Big Ten Game of the Week.
This isn't a big game. Is it? 23 claimed national championships. 11 Heisman Trophy winners. The most meetings in Rose Bowl history. But this can't be a big game, can it? First matchup within the Big Ten. CFP stakes on the line. The Trojans and the Wolverines in the big house?
Step inside now, Michigan Stadium.
No, it feels much bigger than that.
So excited to break down this matchup with our friends Chris Trevino from USCFootball.com and Sam Webb from the Michigan Insider. Guys, it's like a Rose Bowl in September and the Big Ten opener for USC at the Big House. I mean, does it get any bigger than this? How many times can I say big during this segment? We're going to test it. But let's start with what's at stake for each team in this one. Chris, kick us off with USC.
It means a whole lot for USC and this Lincoln Riley team. I mean, the expectations for this team were all over the place. Nobody knew what to make of USC going into this season after the disappointing season in 2023. A new defensive coordinator, a new defensive staff. They were a big question mark. And through the first 2 weeks of the season, including their bye, they have impressed across the nation, beating LSU and then shutting out Utah State. They have a lot of momentum. They have a lot of juice. And now people are talking about them as a legitimate college football playoff contender and a contender in the Big Ten up there with Oregon and Ohio State. So a win in the Big House in their Big Ten debut in this primetime game for CBS would mean everything and give them another juicy resume win for their college football playoff. So this means a whole lot, and especially going in as a favorite if they can handle the target on their back.
Emily, for Michigan, it's the complexion for the season. Coming in, they were looked at as a national title contender. Again, certainly a Big Ten title contender. But after the Week 2 blowout loss to Texas, a lot of teams, a lot of people across the country thinking that Michigan is going to fall off the map. If they go out and lay an egg against USC, I think people are going to think that they are not going to be in the picture at all. So if Michigan can't get it together this week, if they can't show that they are back and to be reckoned with, then they're going to be considered an also-ran. So there's a lot at stake. They have to show that they have a pulse offensively. Because through 3 weeks, I think you saw all the losses that they had offensively really took a toll, certainly at the quarterback position. They're still looking to find a way, all the losses along the offensive line, losing 5 offensive linemen. They haven't been able to recover from that, the wide receiver position. So have to find an identity offensively, and then defensively, for all the returners that they have on that side of the ball, they've shown some leakage over there. And they have to show that they have the star power that can actually produce at a championship level. This will be a great test to show that they can actually do that.
We'll talk about both defenses in just a little bit, but let's start with offense. I mean, Alex Orji is going to get the start at quarterback, the first start of his career. So, Sam, how does this change what Michigan wants to do on offense? You mentioned that identity. How does this change that, or maybe solidify the identity?
Yeah, it's a great question, Emily, a great question. Identity-wise, I think the Michigan coaching staff would tell you that you look at their playbook and coming into the season, it's the same. Their play sheet was the same. They're running the same menu that they had last year. But, I've never coached before. But my philosophy is your identity is what you can do. And they can't do what they did last year. They can't be the kind of balanced offense that they were last year. And I think with Alex Orji, you lean even heavier into your run game. Now, all the same plays are in the playbook, but I think the frequency of some of your quarterback runs that were in there with J.J. McCarthy, I think the frequency of some of those plays move up the play sheet. So a lot of your quarterback draws and your bluff runs and, your zone reads, a lot of that play menu moves up the board. And now some of the things that you saw over the first 3 games, especially in the Texas game where Texas didn't respect their run game as much. And in so doing, you didn't see the play action game be as productive in the game. Maybe that becomes more productive. Maybe now you get some of those shot plays come back to the fore, and then he has to show that he can actually hit those plays, something that they didn't really test. He hasn't really gotten an opportunity to show he can throw the football down the field. He's going to get that opportunity now, and then he has to show he can actually hit those plays. And if he can, Michigan suddenly becomes relevant in the Big Ten title picture and the national title picture again.
Yeah, our Brad Crawford saying this is essentially an elimination game for Michigan when it comes to their college football playoff chances. So a lot riding on this quarterback change. On the other side, though, I feel like the identity for USC has been clean football, especially for Miller Moss. 72.7% completion percentage, no picks so far in the season. So, Chris, what is it about his skill set that works so well in this Lincoln Riley offense?
I don't think it's fair to call Miller Moss a game manager. He's more of that field general for USC, and he's a different type of quarterback than Lincoln Riley has worked with. He's not a Jalen Hurts. He's not a Kyler Murray. He's not a Caleb Williams, but he plays to his strengths. Lincoln Riley recently said, Miller Moss might be one of the smartest quarterbacks I have ever coached, and that's a big praise coming from Lincoln Riley, obviously, but Miller has been the same guy we've seen since his high school days, and he is a smart quarterback. He knows where to get the ball. He's going to get the ball out fast, and I think that's something he's really been doing. And he's not going to take huge risk and put the ball in play in dangerous spots where a turnover could kill a team. He's going to be calm. He's going to be poised. He has the locker room around him, and that is what kind of just made him a perfect QB for this season. They've been unheralded, and Miller Moss, has been a long-time backup, but he's the perfect quarterback to lead this team, a team with a lot of chips on their shoulder, and he's just been, so poised and calm and leading them. He's not going to be a runner. He can run, though, so we wouldn't be surprised if we saw him some of that, but he's just going to keep everyone calm, everyone poised, going to get everyone up on the sideline, ready to play, and not put the ball in danger.
It's fun to talk about these offenses, but ultimately I know both defense want to make life difficult for these quarterbacks. So defensively, how do you evaluate your respective teams on defense, considering all the changes the units went through from last year to this year? Sam, let's start with Michigan.
Well, I think for Sharon Moore, a big key was with the turnover in the coaching staff was to try to keep as much the same as possible with scheme. And so he went and got Wink Martindale, the guy that Jesse Minter learned under. The guy that basically D'Anton Lynn, the USC defensive coordinator, he's the godfather. Wink Martindale is the godfather of that defense. And so what you've seen, though, is that as the scheme is the same, even though you come in and he's kind of putting a lot of the same play calls in place, you still have some new pieces that have come to the fore. So you got a young corner in Jair Hill in there. You got some transfers that have come in. So a lot of the same play calls, you still got some new pieces that are learning those play calls. So it is kind of slowed down the pace of those guys being able to go out and execute. and you've seen Michigan kind of give up more plays than they're accustomed to giving up, and they haven't been able to get off the field on third down in the way that you'd like to see. And that was a real big issue against Texas. First half of that game, Texas was 8 for 10 on third down conversion. Last week against Arkansas State in the first quarter of that game, Texas' first series of that game, Texas was pretty successful on third down before Michigan tightened up. So I think a big key for Michigan is going to be third down defense. They're going to have to try to confuse Miller Moss. You heard Chris talking about he's a very smart quarterback. I think he's going to benefit from seeing a defense that he's going to be kind of familiar with, at least schematically, seeing a similar defense in practice every day. So the challenge for Michigan is going to be, how do you confuse a smart quarterback that's used to seeing a very similar scheme, and you have some young players or some new players to your scheme that have shown some leakage? You got to tighten up, try to confuse them, try to pressure them without giving up too much in your defense, a defense that has given up some things in the first 3 weeks of the season.
Obviously, it's a new scheme for USC under D'Anton Lynn, but just the mentality and the back-to-basics foundations that this coaching staff built over the offseason is why you're seeing such a vast improvement for USC's defense in 2024. They were one of the worst tackling teams last season, and this year, there are some missed tackles, but what you're seeing is there's multiple guys around the ball. So if the first guy misses the tackle, it's okay because there's 3 other guys to pick up the slack for him. Their physicality is just a 180 from last season. Go watch the LSU tape. They're going toe-to-toe with that LSU offensive line. They are bullying them at times. Eric Henderson, this D-line coach coming from the Rams, has totally transformed the front of USC's defense and their mentality across the board. D'Anton Lynn has preached this mentality of, yeah, you may get a big play on us, but you have to earn your touchdown. You have to earn your points. So they could give up a big 30-yard run, whatever. You're still not in the end zone, and you are going to have to go through this entire defense to get to that end zone. They're kind of playing with this newfound edge, and yeah, the new scheme has been great. They've been very versatile. They've been very creative, but just having this new physical front and this new energized mentality has really transformed how they look and how they play on the field.
Also coming off a shutout for the first time in over a decade. So excited for this one. Thank you both so much for the great breakdowns.
Thanks to Emily, Chris, and Sam for the great insight. To keep up with everything USC, make sure you're locked into USCfootball.com. And for everything Michigan, the MichiganInsider.com is the place to be. Coming up next on the show, the 5-star prospects are out and about as we check in with our national recruiting analyst for the biggest names on campus at the biggest games. Recruiting never sleeps, and, well, that's why we got guys like Tom Loy hanging around, national recruiting analyst at 24/7 Sports. Tom, it may not look like it, but it's a big weekend on the Plains this weekend as Auburn hosts Arkansas. You got guys like 5-star receiver Caleb Cunningham, who's currently committed to the Crimson Tide. He'll be on campus. What about that other guy, Deuce Knight, 4-star quarterback, currently committed to Notre Dame? He'll be on campus as well on the Plains. Tom, what can you tell us about what's shaping up to be a pretty big weekend for Hugh Freeze and company?
I feel like it's Groundhog Day. I mean, we're talking about Deuce Knight yet again. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. This is a guy that both Notre Dame and Auburn look at as committed in their class. Obviously, with Notre Dame, it's public. With Auburn, it's private. But he's given strong indications to both programs that he's coming. And you still got Ole Miss hanging around. So a long way to go until this one's done, at least officially. But at this point, I'd still be surprised if he doesn't end up at Auburn. He's returning again to campus this weekend. He's going to be back next weekend for the Oklahoma game. That's going to be his official visit. Notre Dame still wants him in town next week for the Louisville game, but it looks more likely that if he does return to South Bend, it's going to be down the road, maybe Stanford, maybe Florida State. But the longer this goes, the better for Notre Dame. At this point, I would be absolutely shocked if Auburn loses, misses out, and doesn't have Deuce Knight in the class. The other one I want to talk about is 5-star wide receiver Caleb Cunningham. Alabama feels great about keeping him in the class. He's connected well with the staff. He likes what he sees from elite quarterback Keelan Russell. Those guys have hit it off. But this recruitment also is far from over. He's talking to Auburn, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, many others. Auburn believes flipping Deuce Knight will be a huge factor when it comes to Caleb Cunningham. So those two talk often, they're close. They've talked about playing with each other at the next level. So at this point, this weekend is going to be massive for both parties, both Deuce Knight, both Caleb Cunningham. It's simple as that. They need a home run visit to potentially land both of them down the road.
All right, let's talk about the other Tigers, the Bayou Bengals there in Louisiana. Big weekend for them. They host UCLA. And, Tom, you look at LSU, they have the number 3 ranked class in 2025. They are trying to hold on desperately to 5-star cornerback DJ Pickett as Mario Cristobal and his staff continue to press. Also, they look to impress 2027 quarterback Elijah Haven.
Huge visit for DJ Pickett, and it's one of many he's going to take to LSU moving forward. But I think he's going to take 3 trips to Baton Rouge at some point this fall. So you still got the 3 teams battling. You got LSU, Miami, and Oregon. There's still a ton of smoke about the Hurricanes, and flipping him won't be easy. But there's still a long way to go here. I think that LSU needs to just go in, set the tone this weekend, have a really good visit, and just keep the momentum flowing. If they lose, if they struggle defensively, it's not going to sit well, especially with what Miami's doing. But at this point, I feel like LSU feels confident, but Miami feels optimistic when it comes to 5-star cornerback DJ Pickett. And the other one you mentioned, Elijah Haven, the number 1 prospect according to 24/7 Sports in the class of 2027. He is from Baton Rouge. He loves LSU. That said, he is very open to a lot of schools. For me, they have some really good quarterbacks in the 2027 class coming to campus, including Colton Nussmeier, the brother of current quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. So I think LSU needs to offer not just one, but both of those guys and make it very clear, like, hey, we have a couple top of the board targets in 2027, and we want one of you guys, but whoever wants to jump in first, your spot is there. I don't think they can go a very long time without offering at least one of them or both of them. I think it would be very smart for LSU to offer Elijah Haven this weekend, along with Colton Nussmeier. I think it's kind of an embarrassment of riches because I think LSU would be in a very good spot for both of them.
Tom, real quick, CBS Game of the Week, Michigan, USC in Ann Arbor. What can Michigan do to maybe get over the line with a guy like top 247 linebacker Nathaniel Wosu-Boateng?
This is a huge visit when it comes to Michigan because at this point I see Notre Dame and Michigan battling it out. USC and Texas are also in play, and he's going to see Notre Dame and Texas moving forward. So really Michigan's getting the last first crack at him, if you want to call it that. So my guess is that Notre Dame eventually lands him and gets him to follow in his brother's footsteps, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. But this is a huge visit. It's like with the other guys we mentioned. Michigan needs to really show out and show that there's a bright future, and we'll see if they can get it done this weekend.
Tom Loy, we appreciate you being on as always. And guys, make sure to follow Tom Loy's work at 247sports.com. And guys, for all your college football and recruiting information, there's no better place to be than 247sports.com and the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Guys, we appreciate you joining us. As always, for Tom Loy, I'm Cooper Patagna. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.